just all right, I call the meeting to order. Land acknowledgement, all members of the Court of Revision are present. Land acknowledgements, we acknowledge that we are on land surrounded by water, originally inhabited by indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties agreements between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Lenape allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, Huron-Wendat people, and the Caldwell First Nation. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Any disclosure or pecuniary interest on the agenda as presented? Okay, that will be duly noted. Thank you. Introduction. The purpose of the meeting is to hear from affected owners who wishes to appeal his or her assessment or part thereof as set out in the drainage report prepared by Dillon Consultant Limited. Now is dated February 7th, 2023. So I'll pass it on to Alicia. Or Alexia, sorry. I'll get it right someday.
That's okay. Thank you, Your Worship. On March 28th of this year, Council approved the technical aspects of the report at the meeting to consider and provisionally adopted bylaw number 2023-043. No landowners registered to be a delegate at that meeting. Since the meeting to consider, one landowner has reached out to me with questions and concerns. One delegate, Ms. Lucier, has registered as a delegate tonight. Mr. Mark Hernandez from Dillon Consulting is also joining us this evening to help answer any questions that the court or the delegate may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Delegations, we have with us this evening Mark Hernandez, professional engineer from the drainage engineer and with Dillon Consulting. I don't know if there's anything you want to add at this stage or you want to just hold off. Okay. Our second delegation is Shelley Lucier, affected property owner, and can ask Ms. Lucier to please come forward. Good afternoon.
Good evening, Your Worship and fellow town councillors. Thank you for allowing me to present this evening. My name is Shelley Lucier and I reside at 3409 Concession 11 in Tecumseh. The purpose this evening is to ensure that my concerns are heard by town council as it relates to the upcoming construction and the subsequent installation of a new drain that directly affects my residents. I recently participated in a meeting on Wednesday, February 1st, 2023, to discuss the draft drainage report for the 11th concession drain branch. At this meeting, many concerns were raised by myself and my neighbors, including but not limited to the rationale for the overall costs, the division of the costs associated with the new drain installation, the commitment to those costs outlined, the absence of key players at meetings, and the consultation process, to name but a few. It should be noted I did not receive any notifications for meetings prior to the February 1st when the draft report was sent out. The consultation process. My experience with community consultations is to accommodate the community. It is my understanding no evening sessions were held other than the last meeting of council in March. While the meetings were not deemed mandatory and the town was not obligated to hold such meetings, that doesn't make for a very transparent process. I work many hours as a single mom. And as you notice, I have a disability and it's difficult to provide for my family. I must be at my job and taking time away from work is not always an option. Costs. I see there's no commitment to the cost proposed in the report. The costs provided in the draft report are guesstimates and even rising costs, and with the rising costs from COVID-19 and inflation, theoretically, these costs could increase 100% or more, and the residents would still be held responsible. I'm not aware of any steps that would be available to rebut or question the process or cost for the arrangements and the agreements with the town or the County of Essex. There is a potential for increases that are unknown and will be placed on the residents to incur. The discussion on cost increases could not be confirmed, nor could the process on how many increases would be handled, how that would be handled were addressed. Part of what impeded the discussion about the cost was the representation at the meeting. Well, respectfully, the town appeared, as well as Alexia and the other partners here. The County of Essex did not, and that was definitely a difficult conversation to have without all key partners at the table. I don't think it would be too far a statement to say that if anyone here this evening received a notice for a substantial cost that someone else decided for them for something they were unaware of, they too would be questioning it, as I am this evening. The division of costs. To the best of my knowledge, the town did not negotiate the division of costs with the residents. It's been imposed upon us based on formulas under the Drainage Act. However, I haven't seen any minutes of meetings where the residents were advised of these costs and how they would be, and that they would be, to confirm, downloaded to us. I have not received any notice of the same until the draft report in February. Recognizing no representatives from the county were in attendance at the meeting in February, a solid conversation about the allocation and division of costs was not, it couldn't happen, so we didn't discuss it. Well, this is not your fault. Full participation from all partners when asking for cost sharing does seem like a reasonable task. It should be noted that the developer retrieves their costs back from the land purchaser and the home buyer, and residents are left having to bear the cost with no subsidies available. Tonight, I'm asking council to clarify the details on the costs outlined in the report. The costs are listed, but how the division of the cost was analyzed is not. Who took part in deciding this? It's been noted there's a potential for the increases. What will this look like going forward? When will the work be completed? Because this seems to be a factor in the rising costs of materials, etc. Who will bear the costs of the increases? For the developer that already paid their costs, will they too take part in any increases that the residents will be incurring later down the road? When will we be notified? When will the bills need to be paid? Will there be another process to dispute, particularly if the costs rise quite a bit? In closing, I feel my concerns for this project have been conveyed this evening. I would like to say that while I appreciate the work that needs to be conducted and the developer has the right under the applicable legislation to file certain requests, the handling of this project has been substandard in providing adequate facts to the residents as well as all players at the discussions. I respect and understand this project as a go-ahead, but I would be remiss if I didn't express and have noted my deep concerns about the handling of the costs that have been downloaded to the residents and future costs for other projects that will be happening shortly in our area. Going forward, I truly hope the town of Tecumseh and the County of Essex conduct their business in a fair and open process for the members of the community and afford everyone the opportunity to respond at the beginning of the stages, not at the end of the process. Thank you this evening for your time.
All right, thank you for your submission, Ms. Lucia. Could you make your statement available so that we can have it on record for the clerk's department?
Absolutely, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much. I guess I'm going to look at any questions, but I know you've asked a lot of questions, and if Alexia or certainly Mr. Hernandez, if you can respond to the inquiries.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. I'll do my best. I've tried to make notes. If I've missed anything, we can follow up. So with respect to the estimate is derived based on other tender prices we receive for similar work. So this isn't a guesstimate. This is based on recent prices we have indicative of what the market is providing that service for. So to the best of our ability, we do take that information, customize it for the specifics of this project. And if there are specific inflationary pressures or other considerations, we try to take those into account. We do recognize that it is up to the tenderers to establish what the actual price will be. There are provisions in the Drainage Act whereby if the tender price comes in at 133% or more of the estimate, there is that threshold after which a meeting has to be held with the affected landowners to discuss that and next steps. So there is a protection where, if it is 133% or more, the process does stop and it goes back to the landowners to discuss, how that project will move forward from that point. With respect to the County of Essex not being in attendance, I think we noted at the meeting that the county is usually very good about attending the meetings. They'd attended all the meetings up to that point. There may have been a conflict. However, we knew what their concerns and questions were from previous meetings and correspondence and phone calls that had been had. So we were aware of their input. In this situation, the County of Essex is a landowner, just as Ms. Lucier and her neighbors are landowners. They're treated in the same fashion and they have the same kind of rights and responsibilities. With respect to the cost, who determines it and why it wasn't negotiated? So that responsibility does fall to me as the drainage engineer. I'm responsible for, in accordance with the Drainage Act, developing an assessment that I believe to be fair and accurate. I think we can understand why we don't get into negotiations and what would happen if that did occur. So that was developed by me to the best of my ability. I believe it's fair and consistent with professional practice and other drainage reports. With respect to sharing costs, so as was noted, a PIC was held. The draft report was shared in advance. In terms of the proposed work, the estimated cost and how those costs are assessed, the PIC is the venue at which point that information is shared with landowners. So there's no earlier event or avenue at which that information is shared, unless there were, for example, certain requests or considerations or questions, things of that nature that came up. But in terms of this is where we're looking in terms of recommended work, cost, and assessments. That is all developed and then provided through the PIC, which, as noted, is not mandated through the Drainage Act, but is I think a good practice, something that the town's been doing for quite some time, and I think has yielded a lot of benefits. With respect to the cost to the developers, so I mean, this was initiated by landowners upstream of Miss Lucier, gentlemen looking to build some homes on a few vacant parcels. They have invested a significant amount of money in terms of an enclosure in front of those properties to facilitate drainage in front of those properties, and that money has been paid. They're not getting any of that money recouped. What we're talking about today, and that work is in good condition. There's no concern with it, and it's recommended to stay in place. And so what we're talking about here today is actually the existing piping that's downstream of those properties, which is an old CSP pipe, which is in very bad condition. You can see right through it. It's rotted out, and so the upstream landowner who's looking to develop his property has both paid for the enclosure that's in front of his property, as well as through this report, he's also paying a portion of the costs for the downstream works, because of course the water flows from his property through the proposed revised pipe to the outlet. So they're using that downstream pipe. They are assessed costs through this, and they've paid for the enclosure in front of their properties already. In terms of when it will be constructed, this project does rely on construction of storm sewers along County Route 42, which the County of Essex is undertaking. So it would have to wait until such time as that those sewers are in place, and the town and the county are come to an agreement in terms of time and space requirement for contractors and those kinds of things. So although I can't give an exact answer, I can say that the county is in the process of building those storm sewers. If you go to County Road 42 today, you'll see the contractors out there building that project. And I believe the last question that I had written down was with respect to when it would be billed, and I would have to defer to Alessia on that one. Thank you.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, through your worship, to answer Mark's question about when bills would be paid, it's typically a year after. We need some time to apply for any grants that may be on the drain. I don't believe there are any for this drain. And then also, if any of the assessments are over the $5,000 threshold, landowners do have the option to debenture their assessment over 5 years at an interest rate. Thank you.
Mr. Bartnick?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Mark and Alessia. I just wanted to add some additional comments on, I think, the concern with respect to cost overruns or tender prices coming in a little bit higher than anticipated. So we do go through a public tendering process. The Act requires that if costs come in, if construction costs come in greater than 133% of the engineer's estimate, that we have to bring it back in front of council to have a discussion with council and the landowners on the options moving forward, whether to accept the price or whether to reject and retender. And we have done that recently with council. And there's many different reasons why to accept or why not to accept, right? And I think we've seen tenders come in with a single source or, maybe 2 bids, and we've seen other drainage tenders come back with 6 or 7 contractors, right? It just depending on the time of year and their schedule. So it's not a report that would just be brought back and said, yes, approve. I think administration does review and in their opinion, give a recommendation to council on whether to proceed forward with that tender at the higher price or whether the option would be to retender at a later date. As far as the cost overruns or any additional costs, it's kind of a tricky question, and Mark can probably attest to this. So the assessments schedule within the report itself sets forth the proportions of which the drainage works would be assessed. It gets a little bit more complicated, maybe not in this case, but complicated on drains where there are special benefits, right? So for example, if somebody has a culvert and they want concrete head walls as opposed to riprap, right? So that's an additional cost specific to that landowner. And so when the tender does come back and is accepted and then the assessments do go out, that additional cost for, that specific special benefit would be solely to that property owner. It wouldn't be distributed or kind of smoothed over through the proportions. So, there is a chance that, the tenders may come in higher. There is a chance that it may come in on budget or within reasonableness of what the engineer has provided in the report. I think that was the end of my comments. Thanks.
So what you're saying, any enhancements that any individual wants to put in, those enhancement above and beyond are 100% paid by the individual requesting.
Yes, your worship. And so, on those special benefits, I think sometimes we see significant increases on those special benefits, and that those specific increases for those special benefits would be to that particular owner and wouldn't be cost shared, throughout the landowners or the watershed.
Councilor Jobin.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sherry, for coming to us this evening and sharing your concerns. I do hear you. So we did have an additional meeting, a PIC, which you did attend. So that is something above and beyond the Drainage Act. I do understand and hear you stating just the daytime meetings for the roadside, which sometimes are critical, as some of the drains aren't touched for 40, 50 years in some cases, and people do some weekend practices that make that opportunity to have those discussions. But should we have more? The Act states not. In some circumstances, we have no news from residents because they're familiar with the language and familiar with the process. So sometimes maybe no news isn't always good news, as we have been experiencing. I don't know if we can maybe leverage, and when we recognize that less than 50% of the affected residents you haven't heard from, maybe we could make some calls. If it's only 12 people, it's not like there's 300 residents. Maybe we can come up with an additional step because I feel like this isn't the first time, even in this last year, that we've had this, because it's we're doing more work. We have a bigger team. And so it's far more foreign and we're reaching more people. So maybe if we do have an additional something where we raise the bar a little bit higher and reaching our residents and communicating, hey, this is coming to you. This is the difference between storm sewer and a municipal drain. And this is why you have to pay today's fees. And yes, it's assessed to you 100%. But for today's process, we can hear what are you assessed at? What is your price at this point? And did you want to see changes to that assessment or the works and not have, I don't know. I don't even know. I didn't review your full assessment to see if there is opportunity. Is there an enclosure based on her assessment and she can refuse the enclosure?
What's being recommended is it's currently each of the properties have a continuous enclosure. So there's basically a pipe that goes in front of all of the homes, and that entire pipe is recommended to be replaced.
Does she have the option to replace it and not have it enclosed? Or just do a section where her access bridge is?
I think that is possible. What that allowed the residents to do was have full front yards right out to the road. I'd have to look at it in more detail, but in theory, yes, we could, except for, like you said, the driveway.
Right. So I believe her property is the last one. Or are you the second last, Sherry? Second last house there, or the last house? Second last. So everyone else would be covered except yours in that event. And that would be a less cost to her, right? If that is something, would you know off the top of your head, typically that would be like?
It would be hard for me to say.
Any further questions? Yeah, just on Councillor Jobin. So our whole property is covered
Yes, sir. There's a continuous enclosure across the fronts of the
right
properties.
across. So I think, am I correct, Councillor Jobin, you're saying just access to the driveway?
If price point is your concern, and if there is a way that we can alternate her assessment or the works on her property specifically, I know it'll look odd because I know the strip. There's 7 houses there. They're all, the frontage is enclosed. It would maybe look odd if hers suddenly wasn't. But I mean, if the price is really out of reach for her and that is an option to her, I think that's a discussion we need to have.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Worship. Thank you, Worship, and to council and perhaps to Mr. Hernandez as well. It's my understanding in that section along the western side of the 11th session that not only is there the drain, there's a water main, and there's a sanitary sewer, and it's all within the same boulevard area. I think it's been kind of grandfathered in over time. It doesn't comply with the proper separations that the MECP would require, separations between storm and sanitary and water. And so, although removing some of the enclosure could be a cost saving measure, there may be other complications with respect to the close proximity of the water main or the sanitary sewer that perhaps Mr. Hernandez would have to look into if that's council's wish for the report to be sent back to the engineer.
I think it's the last piece. Mr. Bartnick, could you repeat that?
So I think the option on the table that Councillor Jobin brought forward was that if the homeowner wished to look at removing the enclosure across the frontage of her property with the exception of the driveway, that the council would have the option of referring the report back to the drainage engineer. Typically that would be done at the meeting to consider, but we have done it at the quarter revision in the past as well. Should that be the request of the homeowner and the wishes of council.
And if we're to do that, then the cost of the reassessment removal, that would be passed on to the rest of the,
Well, the act says
like, that's not free.
No, the act does say that it's up to the drainage engineer and his experience on how to assess out that cost. So I don't know if it would be a drain cost or if it would be specific to that individual property. So I would leave that to Mark. But
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make it clear, I'm not looking for council or the town to incur any extra costs in doing this for sure. With regards to the special benefits that Councillor Bartnick just referred to, as well as yourself here, I do have a special benefit on here, and that is because my driveway is paved or cement right to the road. My concern is that that cost is being provided to myself and the neighbors. And so that's the cost to replace it. My concern is that it's there, but it's been done. I paid for it technically because I own the house. However, you're going to break it and now I have to pay to fix what you broke. That's kind of, because right now it's not broken. So you're going to put the pipe in, and if I have the choice, I can appreciate that as it was explained at the last meeting, that I don't have to, I can and stay just with the gravel bed. But if I want to get the cement replaced, I have to pay for it. I wouldn't normally bust up that cement, like, and redo it. So that's kind of where that's kind of the whole price. I could see maybe a percentage of that if, and I know that it was discussed about that it was decided and there was a formula. I'm just still curious. It's not really clear on what formula was used. Is it a formula or is it just what's been used on previous work, and is there something on paper that says, hey, by the way, X times B equals C, and this is what we did, a percentage of this. I'm not sure. Yeah, so I'm certainly not looking for council to incur any extra costs doing another assessment. Can I have an open drain? I don't mind that it's closed and the cost for that. I'm disputing how the process happened, and the extra costs that I'm foreseeing that are going to happen due to the rising cost of everything. And there's no commitment. I'm still not hearing a commitment out of the town council here this evening that says we're going to hold it solid 133%. My bill's 57, 58, 133% before you bring it back to me. That's a lot of money for me. But that's a lot of money for me. So I don't know. And even when you bring it back, is there another cost sharing that happens? Is it, well, you're going to pay 50% and we pay 50%. I'm just looking for some more information on how that's derived. I'm not looking to dispute anything else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll start with the special benefit amount. So we do identify and we separate out the special benefit amounts in Schedule D, which is page 12 of 14 of the report. And there are 4 properties identified with special benefit assessments on that schedule. Essentially, what that is for is, as Ms. Lucier alluded to, is the replacement of the driveways. 3 of them have concrete driveways, and the 4th has an interlocking brick to be salvaged and replaced. The way in which we view this with the assessments is that the finished surface, whether it be asphalt, concrete, interlocking brick, is not a part of the function of the drain. We could get across and access the properties with a gravel driveway. And so the paving in one way or another is considered to be something that is above and beyond. So there is the option there. As Ms. Lucier mentioned, if she didn't want to proceed with that, or if any of the landowners didn't want to proceed with that, it could be omitted. Without any additional costs or having to revise the report. That is an option. In fact, the 4th one even mentions the landowner may elect to perform the work with respect to the interlocking brick. So that is an option. And with respect to the way in which the assessment was done, there is no cookie cutter formula that you can apply on every single project. There are more like parameters or guidelines in which you work, and there's direction within the Drainage Act. There's professional practice. There's consistency with other projects and the way in which we handle them. So without getting into too much detail, and what may still be helpful is that if you look at Schedule C, which is page 11 of 24, it has the special benefit, which we spoke about, which is the paving of the driveways, and the benefit and the outlet costs. The benefit is basically the benefit of having the drain immediately accessible. When you think about it in terms of a much bigger watershed where somebody is far removed from the drain, they still have to get their water to the drain, whereas other properties that are adjacent to the drain have the benefit of being right there. So that's kind of like the easy way to think about what that is. And the outlet is really the amount of flow, the amount of water that you're contributing to the system. And so what we've done was we took the total estimated cost of $68,500, when you remove the special benefit amount of the $9,924, we took that amount and we assessed half of that to the county. The county has, for all of the homes that are fronting the west side, the county has the same frontage on the east side, so they're paying half of that cost. So we take the special benefit amount, we assess of the remaining amount, half gets assessed to the county. And then we go through the benefit and outlet based on area and frontage. And what you'll notice is the properties that front the drain that we're replacing have both the benefit and outlet assessment. The 4 properties noted as Dana Azar at the bottom of that page, they only have the outlet because the portion, as I mentioned earlier, the drain that's in front of their properties is the new drain that they just installed and is not part of this proposed work. So the properties that have the work right in front of them are assessed the benefit and the outlet, and the upstream landowners that already have a drain in working order are just assessed for the outlet because their water does eventually make its way through that drain. So hopefully that helps a little bit without maybe going into too much detail.
Go ahead, Alexia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add, as Mark mentioned, like the concrete driveway is an added benefit to the drain. You don't need it. You can get over with a gravel top. So if we do get to construction and Ms. Lucier says, you know what, like, I don't want the concrete, I'm good with gravel, then for sure we can do that without going back and changing the report. In terms of costs, as Mr. Bartnick alluded to, we do have that 133% threshold from the Act. However, we do look at tenders that come in to see if they are reasonable, how much higher they are than the estimate, and then do come back to council with the recommendation to proceed or not to proceed. In terms of cost, as I mentioned before, if it's over that 5,000, you can debenture, but it doesn't get to the point where the costs are then shared with the town. The Drainage Act is a user pay system. You pay to drain your land. What you are assessed and what you are billed, your bill is prorated based on the tender prices. However, those costs are usually or ever shared with the town does not take a portion of your assessment. So that's why we do have the options for landowners if it is a greater amount and they can't afford to pay it all at the same time. That's why we offer those options to spread out their payments over time.
And over time, the debentures could be what, up to 5 years?
Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's over the 5,000 threshold, they can debenture over 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or certainly comments?
I will actually, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Alicia, if you could just, for purposes of the public here and for communication, what are the next steps going forward?
Through your worship to Councillor Jobin, there is an appeal period after the Court of Revision. Should any landowners wish to appeal to the tribunal, and there's a 21-day period under Section 54 and a 40-day appeal period under Section 48. If no appeals come through during that time, we can then move to tender the work and proceed to construction. But as Mr. Hernandez mentioned, this work will need to be completed after the County Road 42 works are completed.
All right, anything further? Here's a recommendation here that the assessment contained drainage report for the 11th concession drain prepared by Dillon Consulting dated February 7, 2023 be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Higginson. Do I support? Councillor Dorner supports. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. That's it. Anything further, like, I think even on the. No, I'm just talking in terms of she needs. If, again, Ms. Lucia, if you know, you're not, I'm sure you're not happy, you know, in terms of the end result and that, but there's still, you know, the ability to go to the drainage tribunal.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the time tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Worship. I would just like to also add that if there are any additional questions or concerns, you know, by all means, contact administration. We'd be more than happy to sit down with you and kind of go through the Drainage Act process, including the drainage report specific to your property as well.
And then maybe there's still some options, like in terms that has been alluded to earlier about the gravel and asphalt is less than concrete and vice versa. There are some options, or just doing the driveway versus the rest of the home as well. So there are some options there. Okay, communications, members of council, items 1 to 3. If I could have a motion received, Councillor Jobin moves, supported Councillor Dorner on the communications piece. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Nothing further than adjournments in order. Councillor Higginson and Councillor Dorner, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.